Here we go. Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. Let me move this quick, actually. Okay, perfect. Okay, now I'm ready. Wait, there's a whole, like, description thing in the beginning. That's not part of the chapters. It starts with, the fanfic is widely considered to have really hit its stride starting at around chapter 5. If you still don't like it after 10, just give up. Cool. Okay. Chapter 1. A day of very low probability. Every inch of wall space is covered by a bookshelf. Each bookcase has 6 shelves going almost to the ceiling. Some bookshelves are stacked to the brim with hardback books, science, math, history, and everything else. Other shelves have 2 layers of paperback science fiction, with the back layer of books propped up on old tissue boxes or lengths of wood, so that you can see the back layer of books above the books in front. And it still isn't enough. Books are overflowing onto the tables and the sofas, and making little heaps under the windows. This is the living room of the house occupied by Professor Michael Ferris Evans and his wife, Miss Petunia Evans Ferris, and their adopted son, Harry James Potter Evans Ferris. There is a letter lying on the living room table, an unstamped envelope of yellowish parchment addressed to Mr. H. Potter in emerald green ink. The professor and his wife are speaking sharply at each other, but they are not shouting. The professor considers shouting to be uncivilized. "You're joking," Michael said to Petunia. His tone indicated that he was very much afraid that she was serious. "My sister was a witch," Petunia repeated. She looked frightened, but stood her ground. "Her husband was a wizard." "This is absurd," Michael said sharply. "They were at our wedding. They visited for Christmas." "I told them you weren't to know," Petunia whispered. "But it's true. I've seen things." The professor rolled his eyes. "Dear, I understand that you're not familiar with the skeptical literature. You may not realize how easy it is for a trained magician to fake the seemingly impossible. Remember how I taught Harry to bend spoons? If it seemed like they would always guess what you were thinking, that's called cold reading." "It wasn't bending spoons." "What was it then?" Petunia bit her lip. Ooh. Not ooh. "I can't tell you. You'll think I'm..." She swallowed. "Listen, Michael, I wasn't always like this." She gestured at herself, as though to indicate her lithe form. "Lily did this because I begged her. For years I begged her. Lily had always been prettier than me, and I'd been mean to her. Because of that, and then she got magic. Can you imagine how I felt? And I begged her to use some magic on me so that I could be pretty too. Even if I couldn't have her magic, at least I could be pretty." Tears were gathering in Petunia's eyes. "And Lily would tell me no, and make up the most ridiculous excuses. Like the world would end if she were nice to her sister, or a centaur told her not to. The most ridiculous things, and I hated her for it. And when I had just graduated from university, I was going out with this boy, Vernon Dursley. He was fat, and he was the only boy who would talk to me. And he said he wanted children, and that his first son would be named Dudley. And I thought to myself, what kind of parents name named their child Dudley Dursley. It was like I saw my whole future life stretching out in front of me, and I couldn't stand it. And I wrote to my sister and told her that if she didn't help me, I'd rather just... Petunia stopped. Anyway, she said in her small voice. She gave in. She told me it was dangerous, and said I didn't care anymore. And drank this potion, and I was sick for weeks. But when I got better, my skin cleared up, and I finally filled out, and I was beautiful. People were nice to me. Her voice broke, and after that I couldn't hate my sister anymore. Especially when I learned that her magic brought her in the end. Darling, Michael said gently, you got sick, you gained some weight while resting in bed, and your skin cleared up on its own. Your being sick made you change your diet. She was a witch. I saw it, she repeated. Petunia, Michael said. The annoyance was creeping in his voice. You know that can't be true. Do I really have to explain why? Petunia wrung her hands. She seemed to be on the verge of tears. My love, I know I can't argue with you, but please, you have to trust me on this. Dad, Mom! The two of them stopped and looked at Harry as though they'd forgotten there was a third person in the room. Harry took a deep breath. Mom, your parents didn't have magic, did they? No, Petunia said, looking puzzled. Then no one in your family knew about magic when Lily got her letter. How did they get convinced? Ah, Petunia said. They didn't just send a letter. They sent a professor from Hogwarts. Petunia's eyes flickered to Michael. He showed us some magic. Then you don't have to fight over this, Harry said firmly, hoping against hope that this time, just this once, they would listen to him. If it's true, we can just get a Hogwarts professor here and see the magic for ourselves, and Dad will have to admit that it's true. And if not, then Mom will admit that it's false. That's what the experimental method is for, so that we don't have to resolve things just by arguing. The professor turned and looked down at him, dismissive as usual. Oh, come on, Harry. Really? Magic? I thought you'd know better than to take this seriously. Son, even if you're only 10, magic is just about the most unscientific thing there is. Harry's mouth twisted bitterly. He was treated well, and probably better than most genetic fathers treated their own son. Harry had been sent to the best primary schools, and when that didn't work out, he was provided with tutors from the endless pool of starving students. Always, Harry had been encouraged to study whatever caught his attention. Bought all the books that caught his fancy, sponsored in whatever maths or science competition he entered. He was given anything reasonable that he wanted, except maybe the slightest shred of respect. A doctor teaching biochemistry at Oxford could hardly be expected to listen to the advice of a little boy. He would listen to show interest, of course, but that's what a good parent would do. So, if you conceived of yourself as a good parent, you would do it. But take a 10-year-old seriously? Hardly. Sometimes Harry wanted to scream at his father. Mom, Harry said, if you want to win this argument with Dad, look in chapter 2 of the first book of the Feynman Lectures on Physics. There's a quote there about how philosophers say a great deal about what science absolutely requires. And it is all wrong, because the only rule in science is that the final arbiter is observation. That you just have to look at the world and report what you see. Off the top of my head, I can't think of where to find something about how it's an ideal of science to settle things by experiment instead of arguments. His mother looked down at him and smiled. Thank you, Harry. But her head rose back up to stare at her husband. I don't want to win an argument with your father. I want my husband to listen to his wife, who loves him, and trust her just this once. Harry closed his eyes briefly. hopeless. Both of his parents were just hopeless. Now his parents were getting into some of those arguments again. One where his mother tried to make his father feel guilty, and his father tried to make his mother feel stupid. "I'm going to go to my room," Harry announced. His voice trembled a little. "Please try not to fight too much about this, Mom, Dad. We'll know soon enough how it comes out, right?" "Of course, Harry," said his father, and his mother gave him a reassuring kiss. And then they went on fighting while Harry climbed to the stairs to his bedroom. He shut the door behind him and tried to think. The funny thing was, he should have agreed with Dad. No one had ever seen any evidence of magic, and according to Mom, there was a whole magical world out there. How could anyone keep something like that a secret? More magic? That seemed like a rather suspicious sort of excuse. It should have been a clean case for Mom joking, lying, or being insane, in ascending order of awfulness. If Mom had sent the letter herself, that would explain how it arrived at the letter box without a stamp. A little insanity was far less improbable than the universe really working like that. Except that some part of Harry was utterly convinced that magic was real, and had been since the instant he saw the letter from the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Harry rubbed his forehead, grimacing. "Don't believe everything you think," one of his books had said. But this bizarre certainty. Harry was finding himself just expecting that. Yes, a Hogwarts professor would show up and wave a wand, and magic would come out. Strange certainty was making no effort to guard itself against the falsification. Wasn't making excuses in advance for why there wouldn't be a professor, or the professor would only be able to bend spoons. "Where do you come from? Strange little prediction." Harry directed the thought at his brain. Why do I believe what I believe? Usually Harry was pretty good at answering that question, but in this particular case, he had no clue what his brain was thinking. Harry mentally shrugged. A flat metal plate on a door affords pushing, and a handle on a door affords pulling, and the thing to do with a testable hypothesis is to go and test it. He took a piece of lined paper from his desk and started writing. "Dear Deputy Headmistress." He paused, reflecting, then discarded the paper for another, tapping another millimeter of granite from his mechanical pencil. This called for careful calligraphy. "Dear Deputy Headmistress Minerva Mcgonagall, or whoever it may concern. I recently received your letter of acceptance to Hogwarts, addressed to Mr. H. Potter. You may not be aware that my genetic parents, James Potter and Lily Potter, formerly Lily Evans, are dead. I was adopted by Lily's sister, Petunia, and her husband, Michael Ferris Evans. I was extremely interested in attending Hogwarts, conditional on such a place actually existing. Only my mother Petunia says she knows about magic, and she can't use it herself. My father is highly skeptical, and I myself am uncertain. I also don't know where to obtain any of the books or equipment listed in your acceptance letter. Mother mentioned that you sent a Hogwarts representative to Lily Potter, then Lily Evans, in order to demonstrate to her family that magic was real, and I presume help Lily obtain her school materials. If you could do this for my own family, it would be extremely helpful. Sincerely, Harry James Potter Evans Ferris. Harry added their current address, then folded up the letter, put it in an envelope, which he addressed to Hogwarts. Further consideration led him to obtain a candle and dip wax onto the flap of the envelope, into which, using a pin's knife tip, he and pressed the initials HJPB. If he was going to descend into his madness, he was going to do it with style. Then he opened his door, went back downstairs. His father was sitting in the living room reading a book of higher maths to show how smart he was, and his mother was in the kitchen preparing one of his father's favorite meals to show how loving she was. It didn't look like they were talking to one another at all. As scary as arguments could be, not arguing was somehow much worse. "Mom," Harry said, in an unnerving silence. "I'm going to test the hypothesis. According to your theory, how do I send an owl to Hogwarts?" His mother turned from the kitchen sink to stare at him, looking shocked. I don't know. I think you just have to own a magic owl." That should have sounded highly suspicious. "Oh, so there's no way to test your theory then?" But the peculiar certainty in Harry seemed willing to stick its neck out even further. "Well, the letter got here somehow," Harry said. "So I'll just wave it outside and call it Letter for Hogwarts and see if an owl picks it up. Dad, do you want to come and watch?" His father shook his head and kept on reading. Of course, Harry thought to himself. Magic was a disgraceful thing that only stupid people believed in. If his father went so far as to test the hypothesis, or even watch it being tested, that would feel like associating himself with that. Only as Harry stumbled out the back door into the back garden did it occur to him that if an owl did come down and snatch the letter, he was going to have some trouble telling Dad about it. But, well, that can't really happen, can it? No matter what my brain seems to believe, if an owl really comes down and grabs this envelope, I'm going to have worries a lot more important than what Dad thinks. Harry took a deep breath and raised the envelope into the air. He swallowed, calling out, "Letter for Hogwarts!" while holding an envelope high in the air in the middle of your own back garden was actually pretty embarrassing, now that he thought about it. No, I'm better than Dad. I will use the scientific method even if it makes me feel stupid. "Letter," Harry said, but it actually came out as more of a whispered croak. Harry stilled his will and shouted into the empty sky, "Letter for Hogwarts! Can I get an owl?" "Harry?" asked a woman's voice, one of the neighbors. Harry pulled down his hand like it was on fire and hid the envelope back behind his back like it was drug money. His whole face was hot with shame. An old woman's face peered out from above the neighboring fence, grizzled gray hair escaping from her hairnet. Miss Fig, the occasional babysitter. "What are you doing, Harry?" she said. "Nothing," Harry said in a strange voice. Just testing a really silly theory." "Did you get your acceptance letter from Hogwarts?" Harry froze in place. "Yes," Harry's lips said a little while later. "I got a letter from Hogwarts. They say they want my owl by the 31st of July, but you don't have an owl. Oh dear, I can't imagine what someone must have been thinking, sending you just a standard letter." A wrinkled arm stretched out over the fence and opened an unexpected hand. Hardly even thinking at this point, Harry just gave over his envelope. "Just leave it to me, dear," said Miss Fig, "and in a jiffy or two I'll have someone over." And her face disappeared from over the fence. There was a long silence in the garden. Then a boy's voice said, calmingly, quietly, "What?" And that is the end of chapter 1. How's everyone liking it? I like this. Oh man. I love this so much. Yeah, I like where this is going. This is definitely like a alternate timeline for Harry. I like this fanfic. This is nerd porn. The difference between a true scientist who wants to do science and someone who wants to use science. Yeah, I agree. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, and I forgot it was your voice that was speaking. I like the lore and how detailed the writing is. Yeah. Yeah. This is really nice. Let me get some more honey. Honey. It is like a full-on book. It really is. Like book quality, yeah. This is like really well written. Put to sleep voice. I love the premise, yeah. I do too. Really nice. And yeah, I agree. It's really well written. Sometimes you gotta worry about fanfics being like poorly written, a lot of grammar errors, and just the whole like, haha, they had sex. So chapter 2. Yes. I do have to run and go pee though. Chapter 1 was like the length of 2 chapters from yesterday, but we're going to continue to chapter 2 as well, but I definitely won't be able to hold it. So I'm gonna BRB, but I'll just stay on the screen. We're not gonna go to the BRB. Wide vocabulary and excellent grammar. Make me horny. But yeah, let me be right back. I'll be like literally just 1 minute. I am back. I also refilled my water. That was pretty important. So I will have you know I read the dictionary 3 times as a kid. Do I use the knowledge I gained? Absolutely not. Oh, you took the opportunity to go as well. Nice. Nice, nice. Thank you for the welcome back. Yeah, I've got some water. Taking care of my thirsty. Backpack, backpack. Oh no, that's backpack, backpack. It still sounds the same though. I was given animal and dinosaur encyclopedias when I was 7. Nice. And I read them and loved them. And then I just grew up reading more. Yay! Yay, yay, yay! Alright. Time for chapter 2. Oh wait, okay. Let's see. Here we go. Now I'm comfy. Okay. Okay. Like my throat's good? Yeah. Let's see. But let me know if you're ready, if you're comfy. And then we can start with chapter 2. Colorful's comfy. Wolf is comfy. Henzo is comfy. Alright, let's go. Also, I apologize if I hiccup. I feel like it kind of breaks the immersion, but can't control a hiccup. So I apologize in advance. Okay. Chapter 2. Everything I believe is false. Now, just to be clear, Harry said, if the professor does levitate you, Dad, when you know you haven't been attached to any wires, it's going to be sufficient evidence. You're not going to turn around and say that it's a magician's trick. That wouldn't be fair play. If you feel that way, you would say so now, and we can figure out a different experiment instead. Harry's father, Professor Michael Varys Evans, rolled his eyes. Yes, Harry. And you, Mom, your theory says that the professor should be able to do this, and if that doesn't happen, you'll admit you're mistaken. Nothing about how magic doesn't work when people are skeptical of it, or anything like that. Deputy Headmistress Minerva Mcgonagall was watching Harry with a bemused expression. She looked quite witchy in her black robes and pointed hat, but when she spoke, she sounded formal and Scottish, which didn't go together with the look at all. At first glance, she looked like someone who ought to cackle and put babies into cauldrons, but the whole effect was ruined as soon as she opened her mouth. Is that sufficient, Mr. Potter? She said. Shall I go ahead and demonstrate? Sufficient? Probably not, Harry said. But at least it will help. Go ahead. Just Professor will do, she said. And then, Wingardium Leviosa, Harry looked at his father. His father looked back at him and echoed, Then Professor Varys Evans looked back at Professor McGonagall. Alright, you can put me down now. His father was lowered carefully to the floor. Harry ruffled a hand through his own hair. Maybe it was just the strange part of him which had already been convinced, but that's a bit of an anticlimax, Harry said. You'd think there'd be some kind of more dramatic mental event associated with updating on an observation of infinite probability. Harry stopped himself. Mom, the witch, and even his dad were giving him that look again. I mean, with finding out that everything I believe is false. Seriously, it should have been more dramatic. His brain ought to have been flushing its entire current stock of hypotheses about the universe, none of which allowed this to happen. But instead, his brain just seemed to be going, all right. I saw the Hogwarts professor wave her wand and make your father rise into the air. Now what? The witch lady was smiling upon them, looking quite amused. Would you like a further demonstration, Mr. Potter? You don't have to, Harry said. We've performed a definitive experiment, but... Harry hesitated. He couldn't help himself. Actually, under the circumstances, he shouldn't be helping himself. It was right and proper to be curious. What else can you do? Professor McGonagall turned into a cat. Harry scrambled back unthinkingly, backpedaling so fast that he tripped over a tray stack of books and landed hard on his bottom with a thwack. His hands came down to catch himself without quite reaching properly, and there was a warning ting in his shoulder as the weight came down unbraced. At once, the small tabby cat morphed back into the robed woman. I'm sorry, Mr. Potter, said the witch, sounding sincere. The corners of her lips were twitching upwards. I should have warned you. Harry was breathing in short gasps. His voice came out choked. You can't do that. It's only a transfiguration, said Professor McGonagall. An Among Us transformation, to be exact. You turned into a cat, a small cat. You violated the conservation of energy. That's not just an arbitrary rule. It's implied by the form of the quantum Hamiltonian. Rejecting it destroys unitary, and then you get FTL signaling, and cats are complicated. A human mind can't just visualize a whole cat's anatomy and the cat biochemistry. And what about the neurology? How can you go on thinking using a cat-sized brain? Professor McGonagall's lips were twitching harder now. Magic. Magic isn't enough to do that. You'd have to be a god. Professor McGonagall blinked. That's the first time I've ever been called that. A blur was coming over Harry's vision, and his brain started to comprehend what had just broken. Welcome in, Raiders. I already paused. Welcome in. Oh, Drew. Oh, welcome. Drew Sandstorm. Sloth Raid. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for all the follows as well. I am in the middle of reading a fanfic. A Harry Potter fanfic. So, yeah, get comfy. Let's look at this shout out really fast.
Whoa, what's going on here?
Oh.
Faceless warrior.
Oh my, there was a cutscene just to show her.
Show her what? Yeah. Welcome in. How was your stream? You're playing Jump King? Did you beat it? Did you beat it with your feet? Sorry, you didn't beat it. Oh. Yeah, welcome in. Let me take another sip of water. After 8 hours, I need a break for my sanity. Okay. You need to readjust. My headphones are so clunky and heavy that it's hard to get comfy. Oh, sorry. Yeah, everyone that came in, if you haven't been here before, my name is Genevieve Roscoe, and I'm a forest nymph VTuber. The model that you're seeing right now is Thistle. This isn't my usual model, but yeah, we're in the middle of reading a fanfic, Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. We're about halfway through chapter 2. I'm going to continue that. Yep, Zoe's the deer in my lap reading the book. But yeah, I hope you at least had some fun, Jared, even though you had to take a break for your sanity. I hope yeah, I hope you get comfy and find some relaxation here. Relaxation. Blinked a bit. I wouldn't play it if I didn't find some fun in it. Okay, yeah, good. Let us resume chapter 2 as soon as I find my place. Oh, sorry, I just hit the mic. Okay, I found it. Alright, here we go. A blur was coming over Harry's vision as his brain started to comprehend what had just broken. The whole idea of a unified universe with mathematically regular laws. That was what had been flushed down the toilet. The whole notion of physics. 3,000 years of resolving big, complicated things into smaller pieces. Discovering that the music of the planets was the same tune as a falling apple, finding that the true laws were perfectly universal and had no exceptions anywhere, and took the form of simple maths governing the smallest parts. Not to mention that the mind was the brain, and the brain was made of neurons, and the brain was what a person was. And then a woman turned into a cat. So much for all that. 100 questions fought for a priority over Harry's lips, and the winner poured out. And what kind of incantation is Wingardium Leviosa? Who invents the words to these spells? Nursery schoolers? That will do, Mr. Potter, Professor McGonagall said crisply, though her eyes shone with suppressed amusement. If you wish to learn about magic, I suggest that we finalize the paperwork so that you can go to Hogwarts. Right, Harry said, somewhat dazed. He pulled his thoughts together. The Marsh of Reason would just have to start over. That was all. They still had the experimental method, and that was the important thing. How do I get to Hogwarts, then? A choked laugh escaped Professor McGonagall, as if extracted by tweezers. Hold on a moment, Harry. his father said. Remember why you haven't been going to school up until now? What about your condition? Professor McGonagall spun to face Michael. His condition? What's this? I don't sleep right, Harry said. He waved his hands helplessly. My sleep cycle is 26 hours long. I always go to sleep 2 hours later every day. I can't fall asleep any earlier than that. And the next day, I go to sleep 2 hours later than that. 12 p.m., 12 a.m., 2 a.m., 4 a.m., until it goes around the clock. Even if I try to wake up early, it makes no difference, and I'm a wreck the whole day. That's why I haven't been going to school until normal, or I haven't been going to a normal school up until now. One of the reasons, said his mother. Harry shot her a glare. McGonagall gave a long I can't recall hearing about such a condition before, she said slowly. I'll check with Madame Pomfrey to see if she knows any remedies. Then her face brightened. No, I'm sure this won't be a problem. I'll find a solution in time, now. Her gaze sharpened again. What are these other reasons? Harry sent his parents a glare. I am a conscious objector to child conscription on grounds that I should not have to suffer for a disintegrating school system's failure to provide teachers or study materials of even minimally adequate quality. Both of Harry's parents howled with laughter at that, like they thought it was all a big joke. Oh, said Harry's father, eyes bright. Is that why you bit a math teacher in third year? She didn't know what a logarithm was. Of course, seconded Harry's mother, biting her lip. God. Lip isn't in it. I just said biting her lip because out of habit. Biting her was a very mature response to that. Harry's father nodded. A well-considered policy for addressing the problem of teachers who don't understand logarithms. I was 7 years old. How long are you going to keep on bringing that up? Harry said. I know, said his mother sympathetically. You bite one math teacher, and they never let you forget it, do they? Harry turned to Professor McGonagall. There, you see what I have to deal with? Excuse me, said Petunia, and fled through the back door into the garden, from which her screams of laughter were clearly audible. There, Professor McGonagall seemed to be having trouble speaking for some reason. There is to be no biting of teachers at Hogwarts. Is that quite clear, Mr. Potter? Harry scowled at her. Fine, I won't bite anyone who doesn't bite me first. Professor Michael Varys Evans also had to leave the room briefly upon hearing that. Well, Professor McGonagall sighed, after Harry's parents had composed themselves and returned. Well, I think, under the circumstances, that I should avoid taking you to purchase your study materials until a day or two before school begins. What? Why? The other children already know magic, don't they? I have to start catching up right away. Rest assured, Mr. Potter, replied Professor McGonagall. Hogwarts is quite capable of teaching the basics. And I suspect, Mr. Potter, that if I leave you alone for 2 months with your school books, even without a wand, I will return to this house only to find a crater billowing purple smoke, a depopulated city surrounding it, and a plague of flaming zebras terrorizing what remains of England. Harry's mother and father nodded in perfect unison. Mom, Dad. And that is the end of chapter 2.